The ships came without warning on a cold Tuesday morning in December. 12 of them appeared in the sky above Earth, each one the size of a small moon. They were made of something that looked like crystal, and they glowed with a pale blue light that could be seen even in daylight. People stopped in the streets and stared upward. Traffic came to a halt. Children pointed at the sky while their parents held them close with trembling hands in Geneva. Secretary General Amara Okonkwo received the news while drinking her morning coffee. She set down the cup with steady hands, though her heart was beating fast. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer, and it had arrived with warships. The alien vessels sent a signal 3 hours later. They wanted to meet. They wanted to talk. They chose Geneva as the location. They gave humanity exactly 1 hour to prepare. Amara gathered her advisors in the Great Hall of the United Earth Parliament. Defense Minister Chen Wei looked pale and sick. Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood with her arms crossed, her face showing nothing. Scientists, diplomats, and military leaders filled the room, all of them waiting for something none of them understood. The alien arrived in a beam of light that burned a circle into the marble floor. He was tall, nearly 3 meters high, and his body seemed to be made of flowing colors that shifted like oil on water. His eyes were large and completely black, and when he spoke, the words came from a device around his neck that translated his clicking, whistling language into perfect English. "I am Ambassador Tethvorin of the Galactic HFY Council," he said. His voice was smooth and confident. "I bring greetings from the 4,000 species who live under the Council's protection. You have been discovered. You should feel honored." Mara stepped forward. She was a small woman compared to the alien, but she did not look away from his dark eyes. "We welcome you to Earth," she said. "We have many questions about the galaxy and the species who live there." Tethforin made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your questions do not matter. I am here to deliver the terms of your submission." The room went silent. Amara felt the eyes of every person in the hall watching her, waiting. "Under the laws of the Galactic Hegemony," the ambassador continued, "all newly discovered species must pay tribute to the Council. This is the price of existence. This is the cost of protection. You will give us 50% of your planetary resources. You will give us 20% of your population to serve as workers in our territories. You will accept council governors who will guide your civilization. In return, we will allow you to live." Chen Wei made a small choking sound. Someone in the back of the room began to cry quietly. Admiral Tanaka's hands curled into fists at her sides. Tethforin looked around the room with something like amusement. "I have delivered these terms to 4,000 species across the galaxy. Civilizations far older than yours. Empires that controlled hundreds of worlds. They all accepted. The wisest among them accepted within the first hour. The foolish ones took longer, but they all bent the knee in the end." He turned his black eyes back to Amara. "You have a small fleet of 32 ships. We have 12 vessels in orbit that could glass your entire planet in less than a day. You have 1 colony on your moon. We control territories spanning 1,000,000 stars. Do you understand the situation you are in?" Amara understood. She understood perfectly. She thought about the billions of people on Earth who were watching this meeting on their screens. She thought about her daughter, who was probably sitting in front of the television, with her hands pressed over her mouth. She thought about her grandmother, who had survived war and famine and never once begged for mercy. She thought about what it would mean to sell 20% of humanity into slavery. She thought about children being torn from their mothers. She thought about humanity bowing down for the rest of eternity. Just another conquered species in an empire of the obedient. Then she thought about something else. She thought about every time in human history when people had been told to give up. She thought about every war that had seemed unwinnable, every tyrant who had seemed unstoppable. She thought about the simple, stubborn fire that burned in the human heart. She straightened her jacket. She lifted her chin. And she spoke the word that would change the galaxy forever. No. The room held its breath. Tethforin's translator device made a strange buzzing sound. He tilted his head like a bird trying to understand something impossible. I do not understand, he said. Repeat your response. No, Amara said again. We reject your terms. We will not pay tribute. We will not give you our people. We will not submit to your council. The ambassador stared at her for a long moment. The colors in his body shifted faster, moving in patterns that might have meant confusion or anger. This has never happened, he said slowly. No species has ever refused. Then we will be the first. Amara took a step closer to the massive alien. You have 30 days to remove your ships from our solar system. After that, we will consider your presence an act of war. Tethvorin made that clicking laugh again, but this time it sounded less certain. You cannot be serious. You have seen our ships. You know what we can do? Your entire civilization would be erased in a single day. Maybe Amara said. But we would fight you for every inch. We would make you pay for every life. And in the end, even if you killed us all, the galaxy would know that one species refused to kneel. One species looked at your empire and said no. How many of those 4,000 conquered worlds do you think are watching this moment right now? How many of them are remembering what freedom feels like? The ambassador's colors went still. For the first time, he looked uncertain. You are insane, he said. Possibly, Amara replied. But we are also free, and we intend to stay that way. Tethvorin drew himself up to his full height. Very well. You have one lunar cycle to reconsider. After that, the Council will send the Purification Fleet. They will not negotiate. They will not show mercy. They will erase every trace of your species from the universe. He vanished in another beam of light, leaving only the burned circle on the floor. The room erupted into chaos. Some people shouted that Amara had doomed them all. Others cheered. Chenwei grabbed her arm and begged her to reconsider. Admiral Tanaka simply smiled. Amara raised her hand for silence. When the room quieted, she spoke. I know what I have done. I know the danger we face. But I also know something else. I know that humanity has faced impossible odds before. I know that we have fought against tyrants and won. I know that freedom is not something that can be bought with submission. She looked around the room at the frightened, hopeful, determined faces of her fellow humans. We have 30 days. Let us show the galaxy what humanity can do. Outside, the 12 crystal ships still hung in the sky. But for the first time since they arrived, they did not seem quite so large. They did not seem quite so unstoppable. Somewhere in the galaxy, on 1,000 conquered worlds, other beings were watching recordings of the meeting. They were watching a small human woman look up at an empire that had ruled for millennia and refused to bow, and for the first time in a very long time. They were beginning to wonder if things could be different. The clock began to tick. Humanity had 30 days to prepare. For war against the stars, they intended to make every second count. The first 3 days after the ambassador left were filled with chaos. Some governments wanted to surrender immediately. Others wanted to fight. Protests filled the streets of every major city, with people carrying signs that said freedom or death, walking alongside others holding signs that begged for peace at any cost. Defense Minister Chen Dun Wei visited Secretary General Amara Okonkwo in her office late at night. His face was gray with exhaustion and fear. We cannot win this war, he said. Our entire fleet could not scratch the paint on one of their ships. We have no allies. We have no advanced weapons. You have sentenced humanity to death. Amara looked at him with tired but steady eyes. Maybe, but I have also given us a chance. A chance for what? To die with dignity? Our children will not care about dignity when they are burning. Sit down, Chenwei, Amara said softly. And let me tell you what Admiral Tanaka discovered. The Admiral had taken humanity's only ship capable of faster-than-light travel and disappeared into the galaxy. She had gone to find information, to scout enemy territory, and to look for something that everyone assumed did not exist. Allies. What she found changed everything. The Galactic Hegemony was not a happy family of cooperative species. It was a prison. 4,000 civilizations lived under the Council's rule, and almost all of them had been conquered, just like the Council intended to conquer Earth. They paid their tribute. They sent their children to work in distant mines and factories. They obeyed because they believed they had no choice. But they were not content. Beneath the surface of the Empire, resentment burned like hidden fire. Admiral Tanaka landed on a frozen moon called Ket-7, a miserable rock where the hegemony forced conquered species to mine precious metals. There she met a being named Vrixen. Vrixen was a Vorath, a reptilian species covered in dark green scales. The Vorath were warriors by nature. 300 years ago, they had been the greatest soldiers in the galaxy. Then the hegemony came. The Vorath fought hard, but in the end, they fell. Like all the others, now they've served as shock troops for the Council. Forced to fight and die in wars that meant nothing to them, Vrixen was a commander of these troops, and he had spent his whole life following orders he hated. When Admiral Tanaka approached him in a dark corridor of the mining station, he expected a trap. "Why are you here, human?" he asked. His voice was a deep rumble, like rocks grinding together. "I'm here to ask a question," Tanaka said. "Do you want to be free?" Vrixen laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound. "Freedom is a dream for children. The hegemony cannot be defeated. Every species that has tried has been destroyed. Every species until now," Tanaka said. "We refused their tribute. We told them no." Vrixen went very still. His yellow eyes studied the small human woman standing before him. "That is impossible. No one refuses the Council. We did, and now they are sending a fleet to destroy us. We will probably die, but we will not kneel." The Vorath commander said nothing for a long moment. Then he spoke in a quieter voice. "I have heard rumors. Stories that spread through the lower ranks. They say a new species looked at the ambassador and laughed at him. They say this species has a history of fighting wars they cannot win and somehow surviving." Tanaka nodded. "Humans have been conquering each other for 10,000 years. We know what submission costs. And we know that empires fall. Every empire eventually falls." "Pretty words," Vrixen said. "But words do not win wars. No, courage wins wars. And hope." Tanaka leaned closer. "I am not asking you to join us today. I am not asking you to risk your people. I am only asking you to remember this moment. Remember that one species refused. And when the time comes, when you see the Council begin to crack, remember that freedom is not just a dream." She left him standing in that dark corridor. She did not know if she had accomplished anything, but she had planted a seed. Vrixen could not forget the human's words. That night, he told his most trusted officers about the meeting. They told others. Within a week, the story had spread to Vorath soldiers across the galaxy. The humans said no. The humans are fighting back. Meanwhile, on Earth, something strange was happening. Countries that had been enemies for generations put aside their differences. The old rivalries seemed small and foolish now that the entire species faced extinction. Factories that had been building cars began building weapons. Scientists who had been working on separate projects shared their research openly. Old generals who had fought each other in past wars sat down together and planned the defense of their planet. Humanity had always been divided. That was their greatest weakness. But it was also their secret strength, because when they chose to unite, they did so with a passion that surprised everyone. Including themselves, in the shipyards of every nation, workers labored around the clock. They knew their ships were inferior to the enemy's. They knew their weapons might not even pierce alien shields. But they built anyway. They worked until their hands bled and then kept working in the laboratories. Scientists made breakthroughs that should have taken years. Desperation sharpened their minds. Fear made them creative. They found new ways to use old technology. They designed weapons that were ugly and brutal and might just work in the training camps. Soldiers prepared for a kind of war no one had ever fought. They learned to fight in zero gravity. They practiced boarding actions against mock-ups of alien ships. They knew most of them would die. They trained anyway. Admiral Tanaka returned to Earth 2 weeks before the purification fleet was scheduled to arrive. She brought intelligence about enemy ship designs, patrol routes, and supply lines. She also brought something more valuable: hope. The Empire is not as strong as it appears, she told the War Council. They have ruled through fear for so long that they have forgotten how to deal with enemies who are not afraid. Their tactics are old. Their soldiers are unmotivated. They win because no one fights back, not because they are unbeatable. Chen Wei shook his head. They still outnumber us 100 to 1. They still have technology centuries ahead of ours. Yes, Tanaka agreed. But they have never faced humans. They have never fought an enemy that refuses to give up, that refuses to die, that bites back even when it is bleeding. Secretary General Okonkwo stood and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the construction crews working on the new defense platforms. She could see the transport ships carrying supplies to the moon base. She could see a species preparing to fight for its life. We will not win this war in a single battle, she said. We will win it by surviving long enough to inspire others. Every day we hold out, every ship we destroy, every time we refuse to surrender, the other conquered species will be watching. They will see that resistance is possible. They will remember that they were once free. She turned back to the room. Our job is not just to fight. Our job is to show the galaxy that tyrants can be defied. If we can do that, even if we lose, we will have one. The days passed quickly. The defenses took shape. Humanity held its breath and waited for the storm. On the other side of the galaxy, Vixen watched the news feeds from Earth. He saw the small blue planet preparing for war. He saw humans building ships and training soldiers and refusing to despair. He thought about his own people. Once proud warriors, now servants of an empire they hated. He thought about his grandfather, who had died fighting the Council 300 years ago. He thought about his children, who would grow up in chains unless something changed. And for the first time in his life, he began to believe that change was possible. The Purification Fleet launched. 200 warships began their journey toward Earth. They expected to find a planet ready to beg for mercy. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The Purification Fleet dropped out of faster than light, travel at the edge of the solar system. 200 warships, each one larger than any vessel humanity had ever built, arranged themselves in a perfect formation. Fleet Commander Zelthun stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the tiny, blue planet in the distance. He expected this mission to be boring. Primitive species always surrendered once they saw the full power of the hegemony. The humans had been foolish to refuse tribute, but their foolishness would end today. By tomorrow, Earth would be burning, and the galaxy would have another lesson in what happened to those who defied the Council. Begin the advance, he ordered. Standard subjugation formation. The fleet moved forward in perfect order. Zelthun settled into his command chair and prepared to receive the human surrender. It would come within the hour. It always did. He did not understand humans. Admiral Tanaka watched the enemy fleet approach on her tactical display. 32 human ships waited in the shadow of the moon, hidden from enemy sensors. They were small and ugly compared to the alien vessels. They were outgunned and outnumbered. And they were about to do something no conquered species had ever done. They were going to attack. All ships, this is Admiral Tanaka, she said into her communication device. You know the plan. You know the odds. Some of us will not survive the next hour. But we are not here to survive. We are here to show the galaxy what humanity is made of. Today we write history. Today we fight. The fleet burst from hiding and scattered in 12 different directions. Zelthun's bridge crew stared at their screens in confusion. Commander, one of them said, the humans are not retreating. They are. Attacking? Zelthun leaned forward. That is impossible. Our fleet is 6 times their size. No rational species would attack these odds. They are accelerating toward our formation. The fleet commander felt the first cold touch of uncertainty. This was not how things were supposed to go. Primitive species ran. They hid, they begged. They did not charge directly at a purification fleet. Destroy them, he ordered. All ships, open fire. The hegemony fleet unleashed a storm of energy weapons. Space lit up with deadly light. But the human ships were moving in strange, unpredictable patterns. They had studied the asteroid belt for centuries. They knew every rock, every gravity well, every shadow. They used them all. 6 human ships died in the first minute, but the others kept coming. Then the mines detonated. Humanity had spent the past month seeding the asteroid belt with nuclear weapons. Old missiles, dirty bombs, anything that could explode. They had hidden them in asteroids, in debris, in the cold dark between rocks. Now they triggered them all at once. The hegemony fleet flew straight into a field of nuclear fire. 12 alien ships died instantly. Others took damage, their shields flickering, their formations breaking. The perfect order of the purification fleet dissolved into chaos. Zelthun gripped his command chair as his ship shook from nearby explosions. "What is happening?" report. "Commander, they used nuclear weapons. Primitive explosives hidden in the asteroid field. We are taking casualties." "Nuclear weapons?" Zelthun could not believe it. Nuclear technology was ancient. The hegemony had stopped using it thousands of years ago. No advanced species would rely on such crude tools. But the humans did not care about being advanced. They cared about winning. In the confusion, a group of 12 human ships broke through the outer defense line. They were heading straight for the center of the fleet, straight for the command ship. They were burning their engines at maximum power, moving faster than any vessel should move. "Commander, we are detecting suicide trajectories. Human ships are not slowing down." Zelthun finally understood. These were not normal soldiers. These were volunteers who had chosen to die. They had launched themselves at his fleet with no intention of returning. "Destroy them," he screamed. All ships focus fire on those vessels. Hegemony ships turned their weapons on the approaching humans. 9 of the 12 ships exploded under the concentrated fire. But 3 made it through. One of those ships was the UES Defiance, commanded by Marcus Cole. Cole was 43 years old. He had been a cargo ship captain before the aliens came, had a wife and 2 children waiting for him on Earth. He knew he would never see them again. He had made peace with that. "All hands brace for impact," he said calmly. "We are going in." The Defiance slammed into the shield generator of Zelthun's flagship. The ship crumpled like paper, but the generator went down. For the first time in 800 years, a hegemony command ship was vulnerable. Cole survived the impact. 17 of his crew members survived with him. They climbed out of the wreckage with rifles in their hands and breaching charges on their backs. "Move," Cole ordered. "We have maybe 10 minutes before they figure out what happened." They fought their way through corridors that were not designed for human bodies. The aliens were taller, stronger, and had better weapons. But the humans had something the aliens did not expect: complete disregard for their own safety. A human soldier threw himself at a group of alien guards, detonating a grenade that killed him and 5 enemies. Another used her dying breath to shoot the lock off a door. They advanced over the bodies of their own people, driven by something the hegemony had never faced. Humans who were not afraid to die for each other. Cole reached the bridge with 7 soldiers remaining. The door was sealed, protected by the strongest locks on the ship. "Double quotes, sir. We cannot breach that door," his sergeant said. Cole smiled grimly. "We do not need ours." He pulled out the last breaching charge. "We just need to knock." He placed the charge against the door and stepped back. The explosion tore the metal apart. Cole walked through the smoke and fire onto the bridge of the enemy flagship. Zelthun turned to face him. The fleet commander was massive, a creature of shifting colors and cold intelligence. He looked at the small, bleeding humans standing on his bridge and felt something he had not felt in centuries: fear. "You are insane," he said. "Probably," Cole replied. "Not to kill, but to make sure the commander was listening. I have a message for your council. You are in no position to deliver messages. You are going to die here." "Maybe, but before I do, I want you to understand something." Cole gestured at the viewport, where the battle still raged outside. "This is the price of 1 ship. 18 of ours for 12 of yours. Not a good trade, right? Should have surrendered. Should have known we could not win." He took a step closer. "But here I am, on your bridge, with a gun pointed at your face. And out there, my people are still fighting. Still dying. Still refusing to give up." Cole coughed. Blood was running from a wound in his side, but his eyes remained steady. Imagine what we will cost you for the whole fleet. Imagine what we will cost you for Earth. You can kill us all, but you will lose 1,000 ships doing it. And when you are done, when you go back to your council and explain why it cost you so much to defeat one tiny planet, what do you think the other conquered species will think? Zelthun said nothing. They will think that maybe, just maybe, the hegemony can be hurt. They will think that maybe resistance is not as hopeless as they believed, and that thought will spread, that thought will grow. Until one day, you wake up and find your whole empire burning. Cole smiled, blood on his teeth. We may be the first, but we will not be the last. Outside, the Purification Fleet was retreating. They had lost too many ships. Their formation was broken. They were running from a species that should have been easy prey. The message spread across the galaxy that day. The humans had fought back. The humans had boarded an enemy flagship. The humans had made the mighty hegemony bleed. On 1,000 conquered worlds, slaves looked up from their work and whispered to each other. The humans said no. The humans are still fighting. For the first time in a millennium, the galaxy remembered what hope felt like. And in the prisons, in the mines, in the labor camps, beings of every species began to wonder if the humans could do it, why not us? The war had only begun. The Galactic Hegemony Council was furious. For the first time in 1,000 years, a purification fleet had retreated. The news spread across their empire like wildfire, and everywhere it went, it left questions in its wake. How had primitives hurt the mighty hegemony? How had creatures, with nuclear weapons and tiny ships, made the council bleed? The council decided that Earth had to burn, not just be conquered, but completely destroyed. They would make an example so terrible that no species would ever dare resist again. They assembled the Cleansing Armada, 2,000 warships, the largest fleet in hegemony history. Every conquered species was forced to send their best soldiers. Every factory worked overtime to produce weapons. The message was clear. Humanity would be erased from existence. The Armada launched toward Earth, a wall of destruction that would take 6 weeks to arrive. Back on Earth, humanity watched the approaching fleet and prepared for the end. But something unexpected happened on the way. Commander Vrixen had spent weeks thinking about the humans. He had watched the recordings of their battle over and over. He had seen small ships charge into walls of fire. He had seen soldiers board an enemy vessel with no hope of survival. He had seen something he thought was dead in the galaxy. Courage. The Vorath had once been warriors, real warriors, who fought for honor and freedom. The hegemony had broken them, turned them into servants, made them forget who they were. But watching the humans reminded Vrixen of the old stories. Stories his grandfather told him about the days before surrender. He made a decision that would change the galaxy. 2 weeks into the journey, Vrixen contacted every Vorath commander in the Armada. He sent them the same message. Our ancestors did not bow. Why do we? 300 Vorath warships broke away from the Cleansing Armada. They turned their weapons on their former masters and fired. The hegemony ships, completely surprised by the betrayal, took heavy damage before they could respond. Vrixen broadcast a message on all frequencies, making sure the entire galaxy could hear him. I am Commander Vrixen of the Vorath. For 300 years, my people have served the hegemony as slaves. Today we remember who we are. We are warriors. We are free, and we stand with the humans. The Armada fell into chaos. Ships that had been allies moments ago were now enemies. The Vorath fought with a fury that surprised everyone, including themselves. They were not just fighting for the humans. They were fighting for their own souls. The news reached other species in the fleet. The ice miners of Ket-7, who had been forced to serve as engineers on hegemony vessels, began sabotaging their own ships. The Selvari, a race of brilliant navigators, who had been enslaved for their skills, fed false coordinates to their masters. The drone engineers of Axis Prime, mechanical beings who had been treated as property for centuries, simply stopped working. The Cleansing Armada was destroying itself from within. On Earth, Secretary General Amara Okonkwo received the news with tears in her eyes. The seed that Admiral Tanaka had planted had grown into something wonderful. Open a channel to Commander Vrixen, she said. It is time to build an alliance. Representatives from 18 species gathered in secret on a small moon at the edge of human space. They came in hidden ships, risking everything just to attend. Vorath warriors stood beside Selvari navigators. Keth 7 miners shook hands with Axis Prime engineers. For the first time in centuries, conquered peoples were meeting as equals. Amara looked at the strange and wonderful beings around her. They were so different from each other, so different from humans, but they all shared one thing: a desire to be free. I will not promise you victory, she said. I cannot tell you that we will win this war. The hegemony is vast and powerful. Many of us will die before this is over. She paused, letting her words sink in. But I can promise you this: we will fight. We will fight for our children and our children's children. We will fight for the right to live as free peoples, not as slaves. We will fight until the last of us falls, and then our memory will inspire others to fight after we are gone. Vrixen stepped forward. The massive Vorath warrior looked at the small human woman with respect in his yellow eyes. The humans taught us something, he said. They taught us that the hegemony is not invincible. They taught us that courage is contagious. My people will follow you, Secretary General. Tell us where to fight, and we will be there.
Oh.
One by one, the other representatives pledged their support. The Free Species Coalition was born. Their first action was not a battle. It was a strike. Humanities analysts had discovered the hegemony's greatest weakness. They relied on slave labor for everything. Their ships were built by slaves. Their food was grown by slaves. Their weapons were manufactured by slaves. If the slaves stopped working, the empire would starve. The coalition spread a simple message to every conquered world: stop working, refuse to obey. Make them pay for every grain of food, every piece of metal, every drop of fuel. It was not easy. The hegemony punished resistance brutally. Thousands died in the early days, but thousands more joined the strikes. The message had taken root. The humans said no, and so can we. The cleansing armada, already weakened by the Vorath defection, found itself struggling to maintain supplies. Ships ran low on fuel. Weapon systems failed without proper maintenance. Soldiers went hungry. By the time the armada reached Earth, it was half the size it had been when it left. Admiral Tanaka led the human fleet, now joined by coalition vessels, in a defensive position above the planet. They were still outnumbered, but the odds were better than anyone had expected. The battle lasted 72 hours. Ships died by the hundreds on both sides. The sky above Earth was filled with fire and metal. Hegemony commanders tried to break through the defense line again and again, only to find more coalition ships arriving to reinforce it. The humans fought like demons. Every time the enemy destroyed one of their vessels, the surviving crew members would take emergency pods to the nearest enemy ship and board it. They fought with knives and fists when their guns ran empty. They used their own bodies as shields to protect their comrades. The hegemony soldiers had never seen anything like it. They were trained to fight enemies who valued survival. They had no idea how to handle enemies who simply refused to die. On the third day, the hegemony command sent a message to Admiral Tanaka: surrender now, and we will make your deaths quick. Tanaka laughed when she read it. She sent back a single word: no. The fighting continued, but it was clear that the armada could not advance. Every meter they gained cost them ships they could not afford to lose. Every hour that passed, more of their vessels ran out of fuel or ammunition. Finally, after 72 hours of constant battle, the cleansing armada retreated. Humanity had survived again. The celebration on Earth was mixed with grief. They had lost half their fleet and millions of soldiers. Every family had someone to mourn, but they were alive. They were free, and they had proven something that the galaxy would never forget. Secretary General Lacquo addressed the coalition forces after the battle. Her voice was hoarse, and there were dark circles under her eyes, but her words carried across the stars. Today, we showed the hegemony that their power is not absolute. Today, we showed the galaxy that freedom is worth fighting for. This war is not over. There will be more battles, more losses, more sacrifices. But we have taken the first steps on a long road, and we will not turn back. Across the galaxy, on worlds that had known nothing but slavery for centuries, beings of every species listened to her words, and they began to believe that maybe, just maybe, the chains could be broken. The coalition grew. Every week, new species joined. Every month, the hegemony lost more territory. The old empire was crumbling. Nothing could stop it. The final battle was coming. 3 years had passed since Ambassador Tethvorin first descended to Earth, his demands for tribute. 3 years of war, of sacrifice, of blood and fire across 1,000 worlds. The galaxy had been transformed. The hegemony was dying. Their supply lines had collapsed. Their slave labor force had become an army of saboteurs. Their conquered territories had risen up one by one, each rebellion inspired by the ones before. The mighty empire that had ruled for a millennium was breaking apart like a ship caught in a storm. Humanity had paid a terrible price. 2 colonies had been destroyed. 40% of their fleet was gone. Millions of soldiers had died in battles across the stars. Every family on Earth had lost someone to the war. But they were still fighting. They would always keep fighting. The coalition had grown to include 30 species from across the galaxy. Former slaves and former enemies now flew side by side, united by a shared dream of freedom. They had built something new, something the galaxy had never seen, an alliance based not on conquest, but on choice. Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the UES Unity. She was older now, her hair streaked with gray, her face marked by years of war. But her eyes still held the same fire that had burned when she first said no to the Council. Around her, 4,000 coalition ships waited in formation. Voreth warships, Selvari cruisers, human destroyers, vessels from a dozen different species. They were pointed at Nexus Prime, the capital of the galactic hegemony. The final battle had arrived, but as the coalition prepared to attack, a message came from the planet below. Ambassador Tethvorin, the same being who had started it all, wanted to negotiate. Secretary General Amara Okonkwo traveled to Nexus Prime in a small shuttle. Her advisors had begged her not to go. It could be a trap. The hegemony could be planning to kill her and break the coalition's spirit. But Amara had never been afraid of risk. She walked into the Great Council Chamber, the same room where countless species had surrendered their freedom. The walls were covered with carvings that showed the history of the hegemony, conquest after conquest, species after species bowing before the council. For 1,000 years, this room had witnessed nothing but submission. Today would be different. The council members sat in their ancient seats, surrounded by guards and advisors. They looked tired. They looked afraid. The power they had taken for granted for so long was slipping through their fingers, and they did not know how to stop it. Tethvorin rose to greet her. His colors were duller than they had been 3 years ago. The war had aged him too. Secretary General Okonkwo, he said. You have caused us a great deal of trouble. You caused your own trouble, Amara replied. You built an empire on slavery and fear. You forgot that slaves dream of freedom. You forgot that fear eventually turns to anger. Enough philosophy? Another council member, a creature of sharp angles and cold eyes, leaned forward. We are here to discuss terms. The hegemony is prepared to offer your coalition autonomous status. You will govern yourselves, but you will pay a reduced tribute. Only 20% of resources, no population transfers. Mara listened to the offer. It was more than any conquered species had ever been given. 3 years ago, it would have seemed like a miracle. But 3 years ago, humanity had not known what was possible. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small photograph. It was worn and faded, the corners bent from years of handling. The picture showed an old woman standing in front of a simple house, smiling at the camera. This is my grandmother, Amara said. She lived through one of our world's great wars. Her village was destroyed. Her family was scattered. She had nothing left. Council members looked at the photograph with confusion. What did this have to do with their negotiations? But she did not give up, Amara continued. She rebuilt her village, stone by stone, with her own hands. It took her 20 years. When I was young, I asked her why she did not just leave, find somewhere easier to live. She told me something I have never forgotten. Amara set the photograph on the table. She said, "Bullies only understand one language. You have to speak it loud enough that they can hear you. And then you have to keep speaking it until they stop." She looked up at the council. "You have been speaking that language for 1,000 years. You thought no one would ever speak it back to you? But my grandmother taught me that empires built on cruelty always fall. The only question is when." Tethforin shifted uncomfortably. "If you are rejecting our offer, then this negotiation is pointless. We still have ships. We still have resources. This war could continue for decades." "Yes, it could," Amara agreed. "And that is exactly what we are prepared for." She stood and walked closer to the council, her small figure casting a long shadow in the ancient chamber. "The coalition does not want autonomous status. We do not want reduced tribute. We want the hegemony dissolved. Completely every species free. Every tribute ended. Every enslaved being returned to their home." The cold-eyed council member laughed harshly. "You are mad. We are the hegemony. We have ruled this galaxy for 1,000 years. You cannot simply demand that we disappear." "I can. I am." Amara turned to face him directly. "You think you have power because you have ships and weapons. But your power was always an illusion. It depended on conquered peoples believing they had no choice. That illusion is shattered now. It will never return." She gestured toward the window, where coalition ships could be seen in orbit around the planet. "We will fight for 10 years if we have to. 100 years. 1,000. Every generation of humans will raise their children on stories of your tyranny. Every species in the coalition will teach their young to resist. We will never stop. We will never tire. And eventually, inevitably, we will win." Amara smiled, and there was something fierce and unbreakable in her expression. "Because we are too stubborn to know when we are beaten. And now, thanks to us, there are billions more across the galaxy who are just as stubborn." She pointed at the coalition representatives who had entered the chamber behind her. Vrixen stood with his arms crossed, flanked by Vorath warriors. Selvari navigators, in their flowing robes, watched silently. Beings from a dozen worlds filled the room, all of them standing as equals. "This is not a negotiation," Amara said. "This is a courtesy. We are informing you that your empire ends today. The only question is whether it ends peacefully or whether we tear it down around you." The chamber fell silent. For a long moment, no one moved. The council members looked at each other, searching for some way out, some trick that could save them. But there was nothing. Their fleet was broken. Their subjects had turned against them. Their power existed only as long as others believed in it, and no one believed anymore. Tethvorin was the first to speak. His voice was quiet, almost broken. "If we agree, what happens to us?" "You will face justice for your crimes," Amara said. "Fair trials, with representation and evidence. Some of you will be imprisoned. Others may go free. But no one will be executed without a proper judgment. We are not you. We do not rule through fear." 3 days later, the Galactic Hegemony Council formally dissolved. It happened in the same chamber where they had accepted the surrender of 4,000 species. But this time, instead of carvings showing conquest, the walls were covered with banners from every free world in the coalition. Humans and Voroth and Selvari and dozens of others stood together, watching as the old empire finally ended. In its place rose the Galactic Alliance of Free Peoples. It was built on simple principles. No species would rule another. No being would be enslaved. And every world would have a voice. Secretary General Okonkwo was offered the leadership of the new alliance. She declined. "Humanity did not fight this war to become another empire," she said. "We fought it so that no one would have to bow ever again." Instead, a rotating council was formed, with representatives from every member species taking turns leading. It was messy and slow and complicated, but it was free. Across the galaxy, statues rose in honor of those who had made freedom possible. Admiral Tanaka, Commander Marcus Cole, who had died in the battle for Nexus Prime, Secretary General Okonkwo, Verk San, and 1,000 other heroes from 100 worlds. But the greatest monument was not made of stone or metal. It was made of stories. In schools on every world, children learned the tale of the humans who said no. They learned about a small species from a tiny planet that had looked at an empire spanning 1,000,000 stars and refused to bow. They learned that tyrants only rule as long as people believe they must obey. And they learned the most important lesson of all, that chains are only chains. If you refuse to break them, the galaxy had been transformed. The age of empires was over. The age of freedom had begun, and it had all started with a single word, spoken by a small woman standing before an impossible power, on Earth. In a simple house that had been rebuilt stone by stone generations ago, a picture of an old woman still hung on the wall. Amara visited it sometimes. When the work of building a new galaxy became too heavy, she would look at her grandmother's smile and remember the lessons she had learned as a child. They asked us to kneel, she would whisper. We asked them to leave. And in the end, we were still standing. The stars shone down on a galaxy where, for the first time in 1,000 years, every being was free. And on a small blue planet, humanity finally took its place among them, not as conquerors, not as servants, but as equals, as friends, as the stubborn, impossible, wonderful species that had taught the galaxy to say no. The new dawn had arrived.